Courtney Hadwin rose to fame with a voice that drew attention across the world. She appeared on stages where judges were stunned, and audiences stayed silent in awe. But as her performances gained praise, pieces of her story began to feel inconsistent. Reports, timelines, and interviews don't line up. There are gaps in what is publicly known, moments that stop making sense. Something in her rise and what came after remains unexplained. The questions linger, quietly, behind the applause. Courtney Hadwin was born in the United States and spent her early years in a small town where most residents knew each other by name. From a young age, she showed interest in music. Family members remember her humming melodies, singing along to songs on the radio, and performing small routines at home. These moments were noted by relatives and neighbors, though there was no formal plan to turn the interest into a professional pursuit. Her early performances were largely informal, recorded occasionally on home devices or phones, but few of these recordings have been publicly verified. School became a stage of its own. She participated in classroom recitals, school assemblies, and local competitions. Reports indicate that even at a young age, she could hold the attention of an audience. Teachers recalled her presence on stage as notable, describing performances that drew more than the usual attention for someone her age. Still, records of these events are incomplete. Some competitions mentioned in regional newspapers or community websites do not appear in other sources, and attempts to cross-reference dates with school calendars reveal inconsistencies. The pattern suggests that she was performing beyond her years, but the evidence of exactly when and how often these appearances occurred is sparse. Online presence began to play a role as well. Short clips uploaded by family or local media captured glimpses of her performances. These videos drew modest views, and small commentary suggested early public recognition. Some sources claim certain videos went viral within the town or community, while others indicate they remained largely unnoticed outside local circles. Public statements in later interviews describe a smooth progression from these early performances to larger competitions, but the timeline does not always match with available documentation. The discrepancy raises questions about the exact sequence of events and how exposure outside her immediate environment developed. Local awards offer another layer of documentation. A few competitions and contests listed her as a recipient of recognition or prizes, but full records of these events are limited. Names of competitions appear in local newspapers or social media posts, yet details such as performance dates, scoring, or judging criteria are absent. Mentorship or formal musical training during this period is referenced in passing by some sources, but there is little concrete evidence to confirm any structured guidance. The absence of clear records leaves a gap in understanding how her early development was supported or guided. By the time she reached preteen years, her talent began attracting attention beyond her immediate town. Reports suggest invitations to perform at regional events and participation in competitions outside her local community. However, these accounts are often fragmented, relying on second-hand reporting or promotional materials that do not fully align with public records. The emerging pattern shows a young performer steadily gaining recognition, yet the details of this early rise remain incomplete. Several of these early performances are referenced by multiple sources, but no verified recordings or consistent documentation exist. How these formative experiences shaped her path, and what influence they had on later decisions, remains unclear. The sequence of events leaves questions open, and the gaps in early records suggest there may be more to her story than the public has been shown. Courtney's exposure widened as she moved from local stages to larger competitions. Regional auditions brought her into contact with broader audiences, though the precise timing of these events is not fully documented. Footage from early televised competitions shows her performances, but cross-referencing schedules, news reports, and later interviews reveals discrepancies. Some sources suggest she entered these competitions earlier than official records indicate. The sequence of appearances is difficult to confirm, and the absence of full records leaves gaps in understanding her exact progression. Media coverage began to note her age and distinctive style. Judges' reactions in audition footage highlight surprise at her voice and stage presence. Clips circulated online and attracted attention beyond the immediate viewing audience. Some sources describe these videos as generating early buzz, while others indicate the exposure was limited to small fan circles. Attempts to reconcile these differences point to inconsistent reporting, with certain performances referenced in interviews but lacking verifiable recordings or press coverage. Reports mention coaching or mentoring during this period, though details remain unclear. Some statements imply formal guidance, while others suggest informal family support. The identities of coaches or mentors are not consistently documented, and the timing of any instruction is often vague. Comparisons between interviews show contradictions regarding how much preparation occurred before televised appearances. Records of rehearsals, practice sessions, and behind-the-scenes instruction are incomplete, leaving questions about the sources of her skill development. The competitions themselves followed a standard format, with preliminary rounds, callbacks, and regional finals. Documentation of results and participant progression exists in some cases, but discrepancies appear when compared to later recounting in media interviews. Some performances referenced in local press coverage do not match the official schedules, creating uncertainty about the sequence of events. The pattern of partially documented appearances continues, showing a trajectory of increasing visibility yet leaving the timeline incomplete. Public attention continued to grow as her style became recognized for being different from peers. Judges' comments emphasize her energy, timing, and unique vocal delivery. Media outlets highlighted her age, framing her as a prodigious talent, but the depth of coverage varied widely. Certain competitions or events noted in interviews lack any accompanying video or photographic evidence. The result is a partial record of her early rise, with verified performances interspersed among mentions that cannot be independently confirmed. By the end of this period, Courtney's performances had drawn both local and national attention. Invitations to participate in televised competitions increased, yet the specifics of how these opportunities arose remain ambiguous. The pattern of recognition is evident, but the supporting documentation is inconsistent. Discrepancies between reported timelines, media coverage, and first-hand accounts suggest that parts of her early path to exposure are missing or misaligned. The exact timeline of auditions and mentoring remains uncertain. Why some events are documented while others are referenced only in interviews, and how these inconsistencies influenced her development, remains unexplained. The gaps in the record continue to raise questions about the early formation of her public profile and the trajectory that led to wider recognition. Courtney's appearance on America's Got Talent marked a clear shift in her public exposure. Audition footage shows her entering a well-lit stage, carrying a presence that immediately drew attention from judges and audience alike. Her performances were energetic, with a style described repeatedly in media coverage as unconventional for someone her age. Judges commented on her vocal range, stage confidence, and timing, noting that her delivery was strikingly different from other contestants. These observations are consistent across multiple sources, yet details about her preparation for the competition remain less clear. The competition itself followed the established sequence of auditions, callbacks, and live shows. Official records list dates and performance orders, but several aspects of Courtney's participation are inconsistently documented. Reports from crew members and fellow contestants occasionally conflict with public timelines. Some references suggest she arrived at rehearsal earlier than official schedules indicate, while others mention coaching sessions that are not corroborated by official production logs. The gaps in documentation make it difficult to establish a precise chronology of her experience in the competition. Media coverage of her audition amplified her visibility. Clips circulated widely online, and news outlets emphasized her age, noting both her youth and the maturity of her vocal style. The attention extended beyond the competition itself. Public interviews and feature articles followed, presenting a narrative of rapid rise. Yet the accounts often differ in timing and detail. Some interviews suggest certain performances occurred in 1 week, while others place the same events at a different point in the schedule. Attempts to reconcile these discrepancies show inconsistencies between production records, media reports, and personal recollections. Backstage activity during the competition adds another layer of uncertainty. Statements from staff members, contestants, and promotional material indicate she spent time with coaches, mentors, and support staff, but documentation is limited. The specific influence of these sessions on her performance is difficult to measure. Scheduling conflicts, last-minute adjustments, and variations in reporting create an incomplete picture of the preparation process. The emerging pattern highlights a performer advancing through structured rounds while much of the surrounding context remains unverified. Audience reaction and judge response are well documented through video recordings. Clips show visible surprise, applause, and occasional standing ovations. Yet while the performances themselves are recorded, supporting details such as exact rehearsal times, coach interactions, and private guidance are missing or contradictory. Observers have noted that while her style stood out publicly, what occurred behind the scenes is less clear. The sequence of events leading up to each performance contains gaps that have not been reconciled with official records or media accounts. By the time she progressed through the competition, Courtney had developed a recognizable public profile. The contrast between visible performances and the opaque backstage preparation illustrates a recurring pattern in her documented history. What is publicly observed is not always fully supported by records or corroborated by multiple sources. The official timeline provides structure, but details outside of that framework show inconsistencies. Discrepancies between reported schedules, interviews, and documented events remain unexplained. How these differences influenced her experience or development is unknown. The gaps in the record leave questions about the full scope of her journey through the competition and the factors that shaped her breakthrough on America's Got Talent. Media coverage of Courtney Hadwin intensified as her appearances on America's Got Talent gained attention. Newspapers, television programs, and online platforms highlighted her age, vocal style, and stage presence. Articles often emphasized her uniqueness and maturity, framing her as a young performer with an extraordinary gift. Coverage was widespread, yet the depth of reporting varied. Some outlets provided detailed accounts of performances and reactions, while others offered brief summaries with limited context. The reporting created a public narrative that suggested a steady, uninterrupted rise, but discrepancies appear when cross-referencing sources. Interviews conducted during this period present additional inconsistencies. Courtney, family members, and staff gave statements to media outlets describing events and experiences. Some accounts conflict in timing or detail. For instance, interviews mention performances or local competitions that are not corroborated by public records or verified footage. Certain media reports reference early appearances that cannot be independently confirmed, creating gaps between reported events and verifiable documentation. Attempts to reconcile these accounts reveal contradictions in the timeline of her early exposure. Press releases and promotional material added another layer to the public story. Coverage frequently highlighted personal challenges or hardships, though sourcing was sometimes vague. Articles alluded to family circumstances or struggles with balancing school and performance, but specifics were limited. Some media reports repeated the same claims with slight variations, making it difficult to determine which details were verified and which were speculative. The pattern of repeated, sometimes inconsistent reporting raises questions about the reliability of the public narrative. Social media amplified exposure further. Clips from televised performances circulated widely, drawing comments, shares, and reactions. Some posts highlighted local pride or admiration, while others noted surprise at her style and stage presence. Documentation of these online interactions exists, but the scope of early engagement is difficult to confirm. Metrics vary depending on the source, and some claims of viral reach are unverified. Observers attempting to trace the pattern of recognition note that public awareness increased rapidly, yet the precise details of timing, audience size, and initial reactions remain uncertain. The result is a fragmented picture of media influence on her career. Coverage established Courtney as a young talent to watch, but verification of the underlying events is incomplete. Sources differ on what occurred, when it occurred, and who was involved in reporting each milestone. While the general trajectory of attention is clear, the specifics are less so. Which parts of the public narrative are fully verified, and which rely on incomplete or inconsistent reporting, remains uncertain. Key discrepancies in timing, source reliability, and event documentation continue without explanation, leaving questions about how her story was shaped by media coverage. Courtney Hadwin's career during and after America's Got Talent was shaped in part by her management and professional representation. Records indicate she had agents and managers overseeing contracts, appearances, and media engagements, though the specifics of their involvement are not fully documented. Public statements refer to guidance provided by representatives, but the exact timing, scope, and nature of this support remain unclear. Multiple sources reference different individuals acting in managerial roles, creating uncertainty about who influenced specific career decisions at particular moments. Contracts and agreements offer partial insight into her professional path. Documentation confirms participation in certain performances, media interviews, and promotional appearances. However, the records do not provide a complete view of negotiations, restrictions, or changes to planned events. Some appearances noted in public statements were modified or canceled, but official explanations for these adjustments are limited. Discrepancies between scheduled events, reported participation, and actual appearances suggest that decisions may have been made behind the scenes that were not publicly communicated. Interviews with staff members and associates provide additional context but also highlight inconsistencies. Some describe hands-on guidance in rehearsals and media preparation, while others indicate minimal involvement. These conflicting accounts make it difficult to establish a clear picture of how management influenced her trajectory. There is limited evidence of structured coaching or mentorship from representatives, leaving questions about the balance between formal support and independent development. The timing of engagements and public appearances adds further complexity. While official schedules show a sequence of events, promotional materials and media reports occasionally report different dates or locations. These variations create uncertainty regarding the sequence of professional milestones. Attempts to reconcile schedules with documented appearances show gaps where planned performances are mentioned but not verified by recordings or press coverage. Management's influence on public exposure is also partially evident. Decisions regarding interviews, social media releases, and public statements appear coordinated, but the details remain vague. Certain messages about her personal life, early training, or background were included in promotional narratives. Yet the accuracy and source of these details cannot be fully confirmed. The presence of repeated discrepancies suggests that aspects of her story may have been selectively emphasized or omitted. By the end of this period, it is clear that professional representation played a role in shaping Courtney's public profile and opportunities. The patterns of scheduling, appearance management, and media coordination indicate some level of oversight, yet the full extent of influence is not documented. Conflicting accounts, gaps in official records, and unexplained modifications to planned events leave uncertainty about the behind-the-scenes decisions. The exact influence of management on public appearances and personal decisions remains unexplained. Which choices were guided, which were independent, and how these factors shaped her path are unclear. The gaps in documentation and contradictions in reported accounts continue to raise questions about the full scope of managerial involvement. Courtney Hadwin's life outside the public eye remains difficult to verify. Reports reference family circumstances, schooling, and adjustments required by her rising fame, but documentation is limited. Interviews with acquaintances provide fragments of information, yet they often conflict in timing, detail, and focus. Public statements rarely clarify specific events or challenges, leaving gaps between known performances and reported personal experiences. These gaps create an incomplete picture of her life beyond the stage. Accounts of family influence vary. Some sources describe supportive relatives attending competitions, helping with travel arrangements, and providing guidance. Other reports suggest logistical challenges or disagreements that affected her schedule and opportunities. Details about these circumstances are vague, with no public records or corroborated statements to confirm specific events. The overlap between family support, personal responsibility, and professional obligations is unclear, making it difficult to establish the exact impact of these factors on her career. Schooling and education provide another layer of partial information. Sources note that Courtney balanced academic responsibilities alongside rehearsals, performances, and travel. However, records of how this balance was managed are sparse. Some interviews imply accommodations were made to allow for participation in competitions, while other statements suggest normal school attendance. Conflicting accounts leave questions about the structure of her education and the effect it had on her public performances. Reports also reference personal adjustments required for public appearances. Courtney is described as learning to navigate auditions, media interviews, and stage preparation at a young age. Yet verification of schedules, preparation routines, or mentoring for these adjustments is limited. Some details appear in promotional interviews or media articles, but inconsistencies in timing and description remain. This pattern mirrors earlier gaps in documentation. Her public accomplishments are recorded, but the context surrounding them is less clear. Public awareness of these personal challenges is minimal. While media coverage highlighted performances and talent, coverage of personal life remains limited and often vague. Some reports suggest hardships or obstacles, but specifics are rarely confirmed. Statements about family struggles, personal adjustments, or behind-the-scenes experiences vary across sources. Attempts to reconcile accounts demonstrate contradictions and missing information. The combination of incomplete reporting, conflicting statements, and sparse documentation leaves significant questions. What personal experiences directly influenced her career choices, and how did early exposure to public scrutiny affect her development, remains uncertain. Key aspects of her private life and the ways it intersected with her rising fame are not fully documented. Critical details about her personal life remain unclear. How family dynamics, schooling, and early exposure to performance shaped her path, and how these experiences influenced later decisions, cannot be confirmed. The absence of verified information continues to leave questions open, maintaining the investigative tension surrounding her story. Courtney Hadwin's career continued beyond America's Got Talent, though her public profile shifted in ways that are partially documented. She performed at events, recorded music, and participated in interviews, but the timing and scope of these activities are not always consistent across sources. Official announcements and media coverage confirm certain appearances, yet gaps remain where planned performances are referenced but cannot be independently verified. These inconsistencies leave uncertainty about the trajectory of her ongoing career. Recorded releases and public appearances show that she maintained a presence in music and entertainment. Dates for live performances, recordings, and promotional events are available in some cases, yet other sources suggest additional activity that lacks corroboration. Conflicting accounts appear in interviews, press releases, and social media coverage. In some instances, the same event is reported on different dates or locations, creating questions about the sequence and scope of her professional engagements. Management and representation continued to shape the path of her career. Agents and public relations staff coordinated appearances, media interactions, and announcements, though the details of their influence are not fully documented. Certain opportunities may have been arranged or canceled at short notice, with reasons for changes largely unreported. Discrepancies between scheduled events and documented activity indicate gaps in the public record. Attempts to cross-reference media coverage with production schedules highlight these inconsistencies. Media coverage during this period emphasized her talent and the continuation of her performances. Online platforms circulated video clips and interviews, yet the reach and engagement of these materials are difficult to quantify accurately. Metrics cited in interviews or promotional materials sometimes differ from independent observations, adding another layer of uncertainty. Public attention was present, but the specifics of recognition, audience size, and media impact remain partially documented. Personal factors also intersected with her ongoing career. Reports reference schooling, family responsibilities, and logistical adjustments, but verification is limited. Interviews suggest that early experiences with public scrutiny influenced how she navigated these responsibilities, though the exact nature and extent of these effects are unclear. Conflicting accounts and sparse documentation make it difficult to establish a complete understanding of the interplay between her personal life and professional activity. The overall pattern suggests that while Courtney Hadwin's talent and performances continued to receive attention, the precise details of her ongoing career are inconsistently documented. Gaps in schedules, media coverage, and public statements create a fragmented timeline. The trajectory of her career is evident in broad strokes, but the specifics of how, when, and why certain decisions were made remain partially obscured. What motivated certain career moves, how decisions were coordinated with management, and how earlier gaps in documentation influenced her current path remain unexplained. The inconsistencies in reporting and the absence of complete records leave questions open, maintaining the investigative tension around her story and the path that has led to the present.